The snowstorm hit harder than anyone expected that evening, but for 8-year-old Lila Morgan, the cold outside felt warmer than the cold she faced inside her own home. Ariana Blake, her stepmother, stood tall in the doorway, her voice sharp enough to cut through the wind. "If you can't learn to behave, you don't deserve to be in this house," she snapped, pushing the little girl out onto the front porch before slamming the door shut. Lila wore only a thin sweater, her small hands trembling as she hugged herself. The lights from the neighboring houses blurred behind her tears. Her stomach had been empty for 2 days already, but the fear of going back inside for help was worse than hunger itself. She knew Ariana's anger never ended with just words. Across the street, a black Mercedes idled quietly, exhaust fogging the air. The driver inside wasn't just anyone. Grant Holloway, the reclusive tech millionaire whose return to town had been all over the news. He had just arrived back from a conference, exhausted, hoping for a quiet evening. But the moment he spotted a small child curled into the snow, the exhaustion vanished. Grant stepped out, his polished shoes sinking into the icy ground. "Hey, sweetheart, are you alone?" he asked gently, kneeling beside her. Lila didn't answer. Her lips were blue, her breath shallow, her eyes full of a silent terror no child should ever carry. Grant quickly removed his coat and wrapped it around her. The weight of it nearly swallowed her tiny frame. As he lifted her into his arms, the porch light flickered on, revealing Ariana standing behind the window, watching. She didn't move. She didn't open the door. And Grant realized something was terribly, terribly wrong. Lila Morgan wasn't always a child who flinched at the sound of footsteps. There was a time when laughter filled her days, when she'd race through her old backyard chasing fireflies, with her mother cheering her on from the porch. Her mother, Claire, was the kind of woman who made every room feel warm, even in winter. She read to Lila every night, telling her stories about brave girls who found strength in impossible moments. But everything changed the year Claire fell sick. The hospital visits grew longer, the bills heavier, and the silence inside the Morgan home thicker. Lila remembered holding her mother's hand as machines beeped around them, promising she would stay brave forever. When Claire passed, a quiet piece of Lila went with her. Daniel, drowning in grief and long work hours, tried to hold everything together. But grief makes people blind in small, dangerous ways. Months later, Ariana Blake entered their lives like a soft-spoken miracle. At first, she acted gentle, always offering to help care for Lila. She brought pastries, complimented neighbors, and talked about building a new life together. Daniel, exhausted and desperately needing stability for his daughter, believed Ariana's sweetness. He remarried faster than anyone expected, but the sweetness was only for adults to see. Behind closed doors, Ariana measured Lila's worth by perfection. Perfect posture, perfect manners, perfect silence. Every small mistake was labeled disrespect. Every tear was manipulation. Lila tried so hard to earn approval she never received. She began to hide her drawings, afraid Ariana would tear them up for being messy. She learned to eat quietly, walk quietly, breathe quietly. Lila wasn't living, she was shrinking. What made it worse was that Daniel never noticed. He left for work before sunrise, returned after dark. Ariana always greeted him with a practiced smile, offering explanations whenever Lila seemed frightened or withdrawn. "She's having a difficult phase," she'd say. "I'm doing everything I can." Daniel believed her. And Lila, not wanting to trouble her father, who already looked tired enough, said nothing. She carried every fear inside her chest, letting it grow until nights felt endless. But the moment Grant Holloway lifted her from the snow earlier that evening, something inside Lila shifted. It was small, fragile, just a spark of the bravery her mother once told her she had. And that spark was about to ignite, because someone else had finally seen the truth she'd been forced to hide. Grant Holloway carried Lila through the swirling snow toward his car, feeling the tremble in her small body even through his thick coat. The inside of his black Mercedes was warm, soft lights glowing across the dashboard. As he settled her gently into the back seat, he noticed how she kept her eyes lowered, as if afraid to take up too much space. That alone told him something was very wrong. He turned the heat up and handed her a bottle of water. She hesitated before accepting it, like she feared being punished for touching something that wasn't hers. Grant didn't push her. Instead, he spoke softly, the way he used to with his younger sister years ago. "You're safe here. No one is going to hurt you tonight." Lila nodded, but her shoulders stayed tight. Her thin sweater was damp from the snow. Grant reached into the trunk and pulled out a spare wool blanket he kept for long drives. When he placed it around her, she whispered a tiny, "Thank you," barely audible. Grant's plan had been simple. Return to town, catch up on work at his penthouse, and avoid the media that always swarmed when he came back from conferences. But the moment he saw Lila on that porch, everything changed direction. He drove toward a nearby luxury hotel, the only place open with reliable warmth and privacy at that hour. The lobby glowed with golden light, marble floors reflecting the soft sparkle of crystal chandeliers. Business people in tailored coats crossed the room, unaware of the drama unfolding just outside the revolving doors. Grant carried Lila inside, avoiding attention as best he could. But a child wrapped in a blanket, clinging to a stranger's shirt, was hard to ignore. A few guests glanced their way, whispering, wondering if this was some celebrity scandal. Grant ignored them. He approached the front desk, asked for a private lounge, and explained quietly that the girl needed warmth and food. As they waited, Lila's gaze drifted up toward the tall windows overlooking the snowy city. For the first time that night, her expression softened with a tiny flicker of wonder. She had never been anywhere like this. But the peace lasted only a moment, because through the glass doors, Grant suddenly noticed a familiar silhouette approaching the hotel, Ariana. And she wasn't alone. Someone beside her was pointing directly toward Lila. Ariana Blake moved through the hotel lobby with the confidence of someone who believed the world owed her respect. Her heels clicked sharply against the marble floor, drawing glances from guests who assumed she was simply another glamorous woman passing through. But Grant could see the tension in her jaw, the forced calm in her stride. She wasn't here by coincidence. Someone must have told her where Lila was. Beside her stood a man from the neighborhood, a nosy retiree who often lingered on porches and commented on everyone's business. He pointed toward the lounge. Ariana's eyes narrowed the moment she spotted Grant and the small figure curled beside him. Lila froze. Her fingers tightened around the blanket, her breathing quick and shallow. The fear that spread across her face was instant, like a reflex she could not control. Grant felt her shrink beside him, and his instincts sharpened. Ariana arrived at their table with a smile so polished it could have been carved from glass. "Oh my goodness, there you are," she said dramatically. "I've been worried sick. I was about to call every hospital in town." Grant rose slowly. She was outside, in the snow, alone. Ariana's smile flickered, but only for a fraction of a second. "Lila ran off," she replied smoothly. "She does that when she wants attention. You know how children can be." Lila's head lowered as though she'd been struck, even though no one touched her. She whispered, "I didn't run." But Ariana quickly spoke over her. "You don't understand," Ariana continued, placing a hand on her chest as if wounded by concern. "I'm trying so hard with her. She's sensitive, very dramatic. Daniel depends on me to manage things when he's at work." Grant studied her carefully. Something about her performance felt rehearsed, too perfect, too calculated. "I found her freezing," Grant said calmly. "She hasn't eaten." Ariana let out a soft laugh, the condescending kind. "She refuses food when she's upset. I can't force her." Lila's eyes slowly lifted, filled with something between heartbreak and disbelief. But before Grant could respond, Ariana leaned in closer, lowering her voice into a tone only he and Lila could hear. "Thank you for entertaining her," she whispered coldly, "but she's mine to handle." And that was the moment Grant realized. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a woman who wasn't afraid of being caught. The hotel staff brought a tray of warm soup and bread to the private lounge, but the moment Lila reached for the spoon, Ariana snatched it away. The sharp scrape of metal against porcelain made several guests look over. Ariana didn't care. Her face twisted into a smile that carried no warmth at all. "Oh, no, sweetheart," she said loudly, making sure everyone nearby could hear. "You don't get to eat until we talk about what you did." Lila froze, confusion flickering across her tired eyes. I didn't do anything. Ariana let out a laugh that echoed off the marble pillars. Didn't do anything? You embarrassed me. You ran away. You made this poor man think you were abandoned. She gestured toward Grant with exaggerated disbelief, as though the very idea were ridiculous. Grant stepped forward. She was shivering on your porch, locked out. Ariana shot him a glare sharp enough to cut. With all due respect, Mr. Holloway, you don't know this child. She lies, constantly. She likes attention. Ever since her mother died, she's been impossible to manage. The room went still. Even people not involved in the situation paused mid-conversation. A few cameras subtly lifted. Someone whispered, "Isn't that the tech guy? What's happening?" Lila's face went pale. Her small hands trembled. Hearing her mother used as a weapon was a wound deeper than any cold night could give. "That's not true," she whispered. "I don't lie." Ariana slammed her hand onto the table, making the dishes clatter. "Don't contradict me." Her voice rose high enough that it sliced through the whole lounge. "You humiliated me tonight. You ran away like some wild child, forcing strangers to step in because you crave pity." Grant could no longer contain himself. "She didn't run away," he said firmly. "She was pushed out." Ariana barked out a laugh, mocking and cruel. "Do you hear this? A billionaire thinks he knows my family better than I do. How adorable." Lila shrank back again, cheeks burning with shame she didn't deserve. Then Ariana delivered the final blow, her voice dripping with false pity. "You can return my stepdaughter now," she declared loudly. "She belongs with family, not with men who think rescuing broken children makes them heroes." Gasps spread across the room. Someone actually stopped recording because the tension was too intense. Grant inhaled slowly, eyes locked on Ariana. And he realized she wanted an audience for her cruelty. And now she finally had one. Grant Holloway had dealt with difficult people before, investors with tempers, competitors who played dirty, but nothing compared to the coldness radiating from Ariana Blake. She stood there as if she owned the room, as if humiliating a child in public was simply a parenting strategy she deserved applause for. And the worst part? She didn't seem remotely afraid of consequences. Grant watched Lila shrink into her chair, eyes fixed on her lap. Every time Ariana spoke, the little girl flinched like she expected a blow. That wasn't the reaction of a dramatic child. That was fear molded by repetition. Grant's jaw tightened. He knelt beside Lila. "You okay?" he whispered. She didn't answer, but her eyes begged him not to let Ariana take her. Ariana leaned forward, her voice low but laced with venom. "Mr. Holloway, I appreciate your concern, but this is a family matter. If you don't return her to me now, I'll have no choice but to involve the police. And trust me, they will take my side." That was the moment Grant understood something important. This woman wasn't bluffing. She spoke like someone who had manipulated the system before and gotten away with it. But Grant had resources Ariana didn't expect. He stood. "You can call whoever you want," he replied calmly. "I'm not sending her anywhere until she's safe." Ariana's smile curved slowly, chillingly. "You really think you know what's going on? You don't. Lila has episodes. She imagines things. She rewrites events to make herself look like a victim." Lila's breath hitched. Grant felt something inside him snap, not anger, but certainty. "Children don't shake from imagination," he said. Ariana's eyes narrowed into thin slits. "And billionaires don't usually insert themselves into strangers' families unless there's a reason. What's yours? Guilt, boredom? Or is it that you need to feel like the hero?" Before Grant could respond, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, then smirked. "Well," she said, "looks like Daniel is on his way. And when he gets here, this ends." Lila's face drained of color at her father's name. Grant leaned closer to her. "I'm not leaving you," he promised quietly. But Ariana stepped back, her confidence rising again. She knew Daniel trusted her. Blindly, destructively. And when the elevator dinged moments later, signaling someone's arrival, Lila's tiny nails dug into Grant's sleeve. Because she already knew her father would believe the wrong person. Again. Daniel Morgan hurried across the hotel lobby, still in his work coat, face tired and confused. He scanned the room until his eyes landed on Ariana, who instantly slipped into her rehearsed panic, throwing herself toward him as if she'd been crying for hours. "Daniel, thank God you're here," she choked out. "She ran away again. She caused a scene. People are recording us. I can't control her anymore." Daniel's shoulders slumped. Stress carved deep lines across his face. "Where is she?" he asked. Ariana pointed dramatically at Lila, who sat curled in an oversized lounge chair, blankets slipping from her shoulders. Daniel's expression softened the moment he saw his daughter, but then hardened again as Ariana whispered something in his ear. Grant watched the shift. He'd seen it before, someone caught between truth and manipulation. Ariana clung to Daniel's arm, her voice trembling just enough to appear believable. "She lied, Daniel. She told this man we locked her outside. She's imagining things again. Please, you have to trust me." Lila looked up at her father, eyes begging for understanding. "Dad, I didn't imagine anything. I was cold. I was hungry. Ariana cut her off sharply. "Lila, enough!" The room fell silent. Daniel rubbed his forehead. "Lila, why would you say something like that? Ariana has been trying." Grant stepped forward. "With respect, Daniel, I found your daughter outside in freezing weather. She hadn't eaten. She was terrified." Daniel stiffened. His eyes darted between Grant, Ariana, and Lila. He wanted to believe his daughter. Grant could see it, but Ariana held him like a leash. Then Ariana raised her voice, loud enough for the entire lounge to hear. "This is what she does. She makes up stories. She manipulates adults. She wants attention so badly she'll say anything. Why do you think the school counselor called us last month?" Lila's head dropped. She hadn't told Grant about that. Daniel whispered, "Is that true?" Tears streamed down Lila's cheeks. "No, I never lied. Please believe me." Ariana pounced on the moment. "See, this is exhausting, Daniel. She's ruining our lives." Grant placed a steady hand on Lila's shoulder. "She's not the problem." "An Athawada," he said firmly. Ariana turned toward him, eyes blazing. "You don't know this child." Grant didn't blink. "But I know what fear looks like." And then, before anyone could react, a hotel guest who had been quietly filming stepped closer and said, "Actually, we all saw what happened." The lounge went silent as the hotel guest stepped forward, phone still in hand. He was a middle-aged man in a gray coat, someone who looked like he'd seen enough in life to recognize injustice when it stood right in front of him. He cleared his throat, glancing between Grant, Daniel, and Ariana. "I recorded everything from the moment she walked in," he said, "including how the woman treated that little girl." Ariana's eyes widened, then narrowed just as fast. "Excuse me? You had no right to film us." He didn't flinch. "You made it public the moment you started yelling at a child." A murmur spread through the lounge. A few guests stepped closer, curious. Some nodded, confirming what they'd witnessed. Ariana's posture stiffened, her flawless composure cracking around the edges. Daniel swallowed hard. What exactly did you film?" The man held the phone protectively. "Enough!" Ariana let out a tense laugh, trying to regain control. "Enough to see a child manipulating an entire room? Children cry, Daniel. Children cause scenes. This man doesn't understand our family." But her voice had lost its earlier confidence. Grant spoke gently but firmly. "Why don't we let Daniel watch the footage?" Ariana's head snapped toward him. "Absolutely not. That is an invasion of privacy." "It's evidence," Grant said. Lila flinched at the rising tension. She tugged softly at Daniel's sleeve, her voice small. "Dad, please." Daniel looked at his daughter. Truly looked at her. Her shoulders drawn in, eyes red from holding back tears, the blanket sliding from her thin frame. Something in his expression shifted, like a man waking from a long sleep. "Show me," he said quietly. Ariana grabbed his arm. "Daniel, don't. This is exactly how they twist things." But Daniel gently pulled free. The man cued the video. Though no one else saw the screen, the audio played. Ariana's harsh voice, the slamming of a spoon, her cutting remarks about Lila's mother, her accusations, her belittling. Every cruel tone echoed through the lounge. Ariana lunged for the phone, but Grant stepped between them. "Don't," he said. Daniel's face drained of color. He looked shattered, confused, ashamed of himself for not seeing sooner. Ariana scrambled for an explanation. "Daniel, it's not what it sounds like." But before she could finish, another voice emerged from the back of the crowd. A woman, older, calm. "I have something to say about Ariana Blake." The room turned, and Lila's fingers tightened around the blanket, because she recognized that voice. The woman who stepped forward was small, bundled in a winter coat, her silver hair pulled into a neat bun, but her eyes, sharp, observant, held the kind of truth no one could easily dismiss. Lila recognized her instantly. It was Mrs. Davenport, the elderly neighbor who lived 2 houses down. She had always waved at Lila from her porch, sometimes slipping her a cookie when Ariana wasn't looking. But tonight, her gentle warmth was replaced by something fierce. "I've been watching this for months," Mrs. Davenport said, her voice carrying across the lounge, "and I can't stay silent anymore." Ariana's face drained of color. "You're mistaken," she snapped. "This has nothing to do with you." "Oh, it has everything to do with me," the older woman replied, "because I'm the one who heard Lila crying through the walls. I'm the one who saw you shove her outside last week, and I'm the one who almost called Child Protective Services." She turned to Daniel. "But I thought you knew. I thought you were allowing it." Daniel staggered backward as if struck. I didn't know. Ariana told me Lila was acting out, that she needed firm rules." Mrs. Davenport sighed. "Firm rules don't leave a child too scared to speak." A ripple of shock moved through the room. Grant rested a steadying hand on Lila's back as she trembled. Ariana's voice cracked with desperation. "Daniel, don't listen to her. She's always had something against me. She hates that I'm younger, that you moved on from your old life." "This isn't about age," Mrs. Davenport cut in sharply. "It's about cruelty, and I've been waiting for the moment someone else would finally see it." Ariana darted toward Daniel, grabbing his hand with white-knuckled force. "You know me," she pleaded. "I've cared for your daughter. I've sacrificed—" Daniel jerked his hand away. "Stop, just stop." His eyes flicked to Lila, then to Grant, then back to his wife. No, to the woman he thought he knew. Why would she lie? Why would our neighbor lie? Why would a stranger risk his name to protect her? Ariana's breath trembled. She was losing control. But then she straightened, summoning the last of her arrogance. "Because they're all mistaken, and I won't let anyone take my family from me." Grant stepped forward, voice calm but unshakable. "You don't get to define family by ownership." Before anyone could respond, the elevator chimed again. A tall man in a suit stepped out, stern, authoritative. "A Child Protective Services investigator." And just like that, the night shifted from accusation to official investigation. The Child Protective Services investigator stepped into the lounge carrying a small tablet and a calm authority that instantly quieted the room. His badge glinted under the hotel lights as he approached the group. "I'm Investigator Collins," he announced. "I received multiple calls regarding a child in possible distress." Ariana stiffened, her smile snapping back into place like a mask. "This is all a misunderstanding," she said quickly. "People overreacted. My stepdaughter is fine. Aren't you, Lila?" Everyone turned to look at the girl. Lila flinched, her fingers twisting the edge of the blanket. She didn't speak. Fear held her voice hostage. Grant stepped in gently. "I found her outside in freezing weather tonight. She was alone." Ariana let out a soft scoff. "Because she ran off during one of her episodes. She does that often." Mrs. Davenport shook her head. "That is not true, and you know it." Investigator Collins raised a hand. "Let's allow each person to speak one at a time." He crouched slightly so he could look Lila in the eyes without towering over her. "Hi, Lila. I'm here to make sure you're safe. Can you tell me how you ended up outside?" Lila hesitated. Her eyes darted to Ariana instinctively. That tiny movement, barely a second, was all the investigator needed. He stood. "I'd like to speak with the child privately." Ariana instantly objected. "Absolutely not. She's unstable when she's overwhelmed. She'll say things that aren't true." Grant exhaled sharply. "You keep calling her unstable. Why?" Ariana's jaw tightened. "Because she is. You don't understand what we deal with at home." Daniel looked at her then, really looked at her, and something in his expression cracked. He rubbed the back of his neck. "Ariana, I've never actually seen her have an episode." "That's because she hides them from you," Ariana snapped, panic tinging her voice. But Investigator Collins wasn't listening to her anymore. He turned to Grant. "Is it true you saw the child outside alone?" "Yes," Grant replied. "She was cold and frightened." Ariana crossed her arms, voice turning sharp. "This is ridiculous. We're being judged by people who don't even know us." The investigator looked down at his tablet. "Actually, Miss Blake, we received a prior concern about this household 2 weeks ago." Ariana paled. Daniel blinked. "A prior concern? From who?" Before anyone could guess, the investigator continued softly. The report was anonymous, but it described behavior very similar to what we're seeing tonight. Lila's breath caught. Because she knew that report wasn't from a stranger. It was from someone who'd tried to protect her long before tonight. The room seemed to stop breathing as Investigator Collins mentioned the previous anonymous report. Ariana's lips twitched, her confidence slipping like a mask melting under heat. Daniel stared at her, confusion and dread wrestling across his face. "Ariana," he said slowly, "did you know about this?" She forced a laugh, too sharp to sound natural. "Of course not. Someone must be trying to sabotage us." Mrs. Davenport folded her arms. "Or someone saw the truth long before tonight." Ariana shot her a glare so venomous it could have cracked stone, but the older woman didn't flinch. Investigator Collins continued, scrolling through his tablet. The report mentioned concerns of emotional neglect, harsh disciplinary tactics, and the child being isolated for extended periods. He glanced up at Lila. It also noted she appeared unusually fearful. Daniel's face fell. "Fearful?" he whispered. Ariana grabbed his arm quickly. "Lies, all lies. Someone is targeting me because they can't stand seeing a young woman take responsibility for a difficult child." Grant stepped forward. "Lila isn't difficult, she's scared." Ariana spun toward him. "Stay out of this." But Grant didn't move. "You keep calling her unstable, dramatic, manipulative. That's not how you describe a child you love." For the first time, Ariana's confidence cracked enough to reveal something darker beneath. Irritation mingled with contempt. She opened her mouth to retaliate, but Investigator Collins cut in. "I'd like to speak to the reporting party," he said. "It might help clarify the pattern." Mrs. Davenport raised her hand. Everyone stared. Ariana's face drained. "You?" she hissed. "You meddling old—" "This meddling old woman saved your stepdaughter's life tonight," Mrs. Davenport snapped. "You can't hide behind charm and excuses now, Ariana. Not anymore." The investigator nodded. "Mrs. Davenport, can you summarize why you filed the report?" "I watched that child shrink more every day," she said. "I heard shouting. I saw her sitting outside alone more times than I can count. And when I tried to talk to her, she looked at me like someone who thought speaking would get her punished." Daniel closed his eyes, pain tightening his jaw. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I thought you knew," she replied softly. "I thought you chose not to intervene." Daniel swallowed hard. The truth was crushing him. Ariana lunged forward, voice shaking with fury. "You have no proof of anything!" But before anyone could respond, Investigator Collins lifted his tablet again. "There's more," he said quietly. The report also mentioned a second witness. Lila's breath hitched, because she realized the second witness wasn't an adult at all. It was someone Ariana never suspected. The room tensed as Investigator Collins mentioned a second witness. Ariana's eyes darted around the lounge, searching for anyone she could discredit, anyone she could intimidate. But nothing prepared her for the small voice that broke the silence. "It was me." Every head turned. Standing timidly near the doorway was Evan Carter, a boy from Lila's class. His backpack hung from one shoulder, his cheeks flushed with cold. Behind him was his mother, a woman who looked torn between pride and worry. Ariana blinked in disbelief. "You?" she spat. "What could a child possibly know about any of this?" Evan stepped closer, shoulders trembling but eyes steady. "I know what I saw," he said, "and what I heard." Lila's breath caught. She hadn't realized anyone from school had noticed her fears, her shrinking presence, the way she avoided going home at the final bell. Yet Evan had. Investigator Collins nodded. "Evan, can you tell us what you reported?" Evan exchanged a quick glance with his mother before speaking. "I saw Lila crying outside her house a few months ago. I thought she fell or something, but she said she wasn't allowed to go back inside yet." He hesitated, glancing at Lila. She looked scared, really scared. Ariana scoffed. "Children exaggerate. You can't rely on—" But Evan's mother stepped forward. "No, he's telling the truth. He came home that day so shaken he couldn't eat dinner. That's why I told him to file an anonymous report with his counselor. I didn't know things were this bad." Daniel stared at the boy, stunned. "Why didn't you come to me directly?" Evan shifted nervously. "I tried, once, but Miss Blake stopped me. She said you didn't want us bothering you about melodramatic nonsense." Daniel's head snapped toward Ariana. "You said that?" Ariana's mouth opened and closed, but no excuse came out. Mrs. Davenport shook her head slowly. You silenced a child to protect yourself. Grant's voice lowered, thick with disbelief. Just how far were you willing to go to keep control? Ariana snapped back, voice cracking. You don't understand. Lila needed discipline. She was... But her words stumbled under the weight of unraveling lies. Then Evan added softly, Lila always looked tired at school, and she stopped drawing. She used to draw all the time. That landed like a knife, because everyone could see it then. This wasn't a single moment of cruelty. It was a pattern. A long, painful pattern Ariana could no longer hide. The energy in the lounge shifted completely. What began as a tense misunderstanding had become a full-scale confrontation, with truths surfacing faster than Ariana could bury them. Her perfect image, the one she spent months polishing, now cracked under the weight of too many witnesses. Investigator Collins straightened, his tone firm. Miss Blake, based on the testimonies presented tonight, we have substantial cause to evaluate the safety of this child. Ariana's voice sharpened into a blade. Testimonies from a nosy neighbor, a billionaire with a savior complex, and a child who probably misheard something? She turned toward Daniel, gripping his arm hard enough to make him wince. You're not really going to let them twist our lives like this, are you? Daniel gently pried her fingers off. His voice was low, pained. Ariana, there are too many pieces lining up, too many signs I ignored. You ignored them because they weren't real, she cried, but her desperation only made the truth louder. Grant stepped forward. Ariana, whether you meant to or not, you've created an environment where Lila is terrified. That's enough. Ariana spun on him, hatred gleaming in her eyes. You think because you have money, you understand everything? You know nothing about raising a child, nothing about sacrifice. Sacrifice isn't the same as cruelty, he replied quietly. For a moment, Ariana looked like she might strike him. Instead, she turned back toward Lila, who clung to the blanket as if it were the last thing keeping her together. You told all these people lies, Ariana hissed. Do you understand what you're doing to this family? Lila's lip trembled, but she didn't shrink this time. She didn't look away. Something in her eyes, small but determined, held steady. I'm just telling the truth, she whispered. Daniel inhaled sharply. Grant's expression softened with both pride and heartbreak. Even the guests watching from the sidelines felt the shift. Ariana, however, exploded. Truth? You don't even know what truth is. If you cared about this family, you wouldn't embarrass us like this. Mrs. Davenport cut her off, voice rising like a church bell. She's a child, Ariana. You are the adult, and yet she's the only one here acting with any honesty. A ripple of murmurs moved through the lounge. Then Investigator Collins stepped between them. Given the seriousness of tonight's events, I am officially placing Lila under protective supervision until a full investigation is completed. Ariana's face twisted with fury, but Lila exhaled, for the first time all night, a breath that sounded like hope. The air in the lounge grew heavier, as if everyone sensed the night was reaching a point where nothing could be undone. Investigator Collins tapped his tablet, reviewing the notes again. Miss Blake, I need to ask you directly. Has there ever been a time when you restricted Lila from entering the home as punishment? Ariana didn't pause. No, absolutely not. That accusation is absurd. Collins nodded slowly. Interesting. Her eyes narrowed. Why? Before he answered, a younger hotel employee stepped forward from behind the reception desk. He looked nervous, but resolute. Sir, I think you should see something. He held up his phone. Our exterior security cameras captured footage from earlier tonight. I checked because, well, people kept coming in talking about a child outside. Ariana's face drained of color. You had no right! Hotel security always has access to our own camera feeds, he said firmly. Grant exchanged a glance with Daniel. For the first time, Daniel took a step closer to the screen instead of toward Ariana. The employee pressed play. Though no one else saw the full video, the audio was enough. Ariana's voice, sharp, impatient, echoed through the speaker. Stand out here and think about what you did. Don't move until I say. Then the door slammed. Every guest who'd been unsure just moments ago stiffened, faces hardening with understanding. Ariana lunged for the phone, panic tearing through her composure. This is being taken out of context. She spilled soup all over the carpet. I needed a moment to cool down. Outside, in freezing weather, Daniel whispered, horrified. Ariana's voice shook. You weren't home. You don't know how difficult she is, how much she pushes me. But the excuses no longer held power. Investigator Collins stepped in. Miss Blake, this footage confirms severe misconduct. I now have legal grounds to make immediate decisions regarding Lila's safety. Ariana froze. Her hands trembled, then curled into fists. She tried to recover her tone, smooth, controlled, but it cracked on every word. You can't take her. I've sacrificed too much. Daniel cut her off, voice breaking. You didn't sacrifice. You hid things from me. You hurt my daughter and made me believe she was the problem. Ariana's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Grant spoke softly, almost regretfully. It's over, Ariana. And that was when the final blow landed. Investigator Collins said, Given the evidence, Lila will not return home with you tonight. She will be placed in temporary protective custody. Ariana stumbled back as though the floor had shifted beneath her. And Lila, still clinging to her blanket, felt something she hadn't felt in a very long time. The sense that the nightmare was finally cracking open. Ariana Blake stood frozen, her world collapsing in front of an audience she could no longer control. For months she had shaped every narrative, twisted every misunderstanding, and maintained perfect power inside the Morgan household. But tonight, piece by humiliating piece, the truth had been peeled away, until nothing remained except the person she really was, and she knew it. Her chest rose and fell rapidly as Investigator Collins finished his statement. Lila will not return home with you tonight. The sentence echoed like a verdict. Ariana staggered back a step, then another. Her hands shook violently, and for a moment it seemed she might crumble, but instead she snapped, desperation hardening into rage. She lifted her chin, eyes burning with feral determination. No, she whispered, then louder. No, you're not taking anything from me. Not again. Daniel blinked. Again? Ariana ignored him, her voice growing sharper, frantic. This is a setup. You're all working together. Him. She jabbed a finger toward Grant. The old woman, the nosy kid, that so-called investigator. You've been waiting to destroy me, Grant answered calmly. No one had to destroy you. You did that yourself. Ariana let out a humorless laugh. Oh, you think you're noble? A billionaire saving a broken child? Please. You don't care about her. You just want to look good. Grant didn't respond. He didn't need to. Daniel stepped in cautiously. Ariana, please stop. But she spun on him with fire. You're the reason all of this is happening. You and your weak parenting. I had to do everything in that house. Everything. And this is the thanks I get? You choosing her over me? Daniel's face fell. She's my daughter. And I'm your wife, Ariana cried, her voice cracking. You owe me loyalty. Mrs. Davenport shook her head. Loyalty is earned, not demanded. Ariana's breathing hitched, her mask breaking for good. She grabbed her purse with shaking hands, pulling out a stack of documents and waving them in the air. He was going to sign over equity to me next month. We were supposed to move forward with our plans. You think I'm walking away empty-handed? Daniel stared at the papers, horrified. You married me for money. And you married me for help, Ariana shot back. We both got something out of it. But her voice was unraveling, frantic and hollow. Investigator Collins stepped closer. Miss Blake, your behavior tonight only reinforces that Lila cannot safely remain under your care. Ariana stumbled backward, eyes darting wildly, as though searching for one last lie that could save her. But there were none left. And in that moment, everyone, even Ariana herself, felt the same chilling truth settle into the air. Her final weapon had failed, and so had she. The room seemed to vibrate with tension, everyone waiting to see whether Ariana would explode again or crumble completely. But something unexpected happened instead. As adults argued and accusations flew, a small, steady voice rose above the chaos. Dad. Lila's voice was soft, barely more than a whisper, but it cut through the noise like a bell in the dark. Daniel turned toward her instantly. Everyone did. Lila stepped forward, blanket still wrapped around her shoulders. Her eyes shimmered with tears but held an unusual firmness, the kind of bravery born from having nothing left to lose. Dad, she repeated, if you don't believe me, it's okay. Her lip trembled, but she didn't look away. But please just look at me. Really look at me. Daniel's chest tightened. Lila! She took a small breath. Do I look safe with her? Silence swallowed the room. Every head slowly turned toward Ariana, who stood unhinged, shaking, eyes wild, then back to the tiny girl staring at her father with a mix of hope and heartbreak. Ariana froze. For the first time, she understood she no longer had control. Lila continued, voice strengthening. I tried to be good. I tried to make her happy. I tried so hard. But nothing ever stopped the yelling, or the punishments. She swallowed, forcing down a sob. I didn't want to bother you. I didn't want to make life harder. So I stayed quiet, but it didn't get better. Daniel's face crumpled, devastation overtaking him. Sweetheart, he whispered. Lila shook her head gently. Dad, I'm not angry. I just want you to see me. The simplicity of the words, honest, raw, without blame, hit harder than any accusation ever could. A few guests wiped their eyes. Mrs. Davenport murmured, Oh, sweetheart. Even Investigator Collins paused, struck by the weight of the moment. But the person most affected was Daniel. He stepped toward his daughter, voice shaking. Lila, I see you now. I promise you, I see everything. Ariana lunged forward, voice frantic. Daniel, she's manipulating you. Children say anything when... Enough, Daniel snapped, sharper than ever before. Don't speak to her again. Ariana froze mid-step, stunned. Grant placed a steady hand on Lila's shoulder as she exhaled, a shaky but real breath. Because for the first time, her father had chosen her, and that single moment changed everything. Daniel Morgan stood completely still, as if the world had gone silent except for the echo of his daughter's words. Everything he had ignored, everything he had excused, everything he had blindly believed, it all crashed down on him in one overwhelming wave of truth. He looked at Lila, really looked, and saw the signs he somehow missed. The shrinking posture, the too quiet voice, the way she always seemed to brace herself for something unseen. Guilt carved itself deep into his expression. He turned slowly toward Ariana. Ariana, he said, voice steady but hollowed out, you will not speak to my daughter again, not tonight, not ever if I have anything to say about it. Ariana stared at him as though she'd been slapped. You're choosing her over me, after everything I've done for this family? Daniel shook his head. What you did wasn't for this family. It was for control. She stepped closer, desperation tightening her features. Daniel, listen to me. No, he said quietly, stepping back. I've listened to you for too long. That single sentence shattered whatever last thread Ariana had been clinging to. Her face twisted with disbelief, then anger, then a fear she could no longer hide. You can't do this. You need me. You said you needed help with... I didn't need help hurting my daughter, Daniel interrupted, voice breaking. I needed help healing, and you did the opposite. Grant stood beside Lila, careful but supportive, watching Daniel finally confront what should have been confronted long ago. Mrs. Davenport nodded approvingly, her eyes soft with relief. Investigator Collins cleared his throat gently. Mr. Morgan, based on the circumstances, I will need your cooperation to ensure Lila's well-being moving forward. Daniel nodded without hesitation. You have it, whatever you need. Ariana grabbed his arm again, but Daniel pulled away sharply. Don't touch me! She recoiled as if burned. He walked to Lila, kneeling so they were eye level. His voice trembled. I'm so sorry. I should have seen. I should have protected you. Tears filled Lila's eyes, but she didn't pull away when Daniel wrapped an arm around her, carefully, gently, like she might break if he held her too tightly. You're safe now. He whispered. I promise. Ariana watched, fury and panic twisting together but powerless to intervene. For the first time in a long time, Lila leaned into her father without fear, and Daniel finally understood. Loving his daughter meant choosing her, loudly and completely. After the longest night of her young life, Lila found herself sitting in the back seat of her father's car, wrapped in the same wool blanket Grant had placed around her hours earlier. The hotel lights faded behind them as they drove toward a small temporary apartment arranged by Investigator Collins. Neutral ground, safe ground. Daniel kept checking the rearview mirror every few seconds, as though making sure she didn't disappear. For the first time in a long time, she didn't shrink under someone's gaze. When they arrived, the apartment was modest but warm. Central heating hummed softly, and a little welcome basket sat on the counter. Tea, crackers, a cheap stuffed bear someone at the agency must have added last minute. It wasn't much, but to Lila, it felt like a new beginning. Daniel knelt down to her level. "We'll stay here for a while," he said gently, "just until everything gets sorted out. You won't have to be near Ariana." Lila nodded, exhaustion settling into her bones. But it wasn't the same kind of exhaustion she'd felt for months. This one didn't come from fear. It came from release. Minutes later, a soft knock sounded at the door. Daniel opened it cautiously, but relaxed when he saw Grant Holloway standing there holding a small bag. "I wanted to drop this off," Grant said. "Nothing big, just thought she might like it." Inside the bag was a slim Kindle and a simple note written in neat handwriting. "For the stories you'll write someday, not just the ones you survived." Lila traced the letters with her fingers. No one had ever given her something meant for her dreams before, only for her chores, her silence, her obedience. "Thank you," she whispered. Grant smiled softly. "You're stronger than you know, kiddo." Mrs. Davenport visited next, bringing a homemade meal even though it was nearly midnight. "You need real food," she scolded kindly. She hugged Lila as though she'd been waiting months to finally do it without fear of Ariana appearing behind her. Daniel watched all of this, his heart aching with both guilt and gratitude. He had failed his daughter once, but not anymore. Not ever again. That night, after everyone left, Lila curled up on the small sofa with her blanket and the new Kindle beside her. For the first time, sleep came without dread. But even in peace, one thought lingered. Ariana would not surrender quietly, and the storm she was preparing was coming. By morning, news of the hotel incident had already spread further than anyone expected. Someone had leaked a portion of the audio taken in the lounge, not the child's face, not her name, but Ariana's voice. Sharp, belittling, cruel. It circulated quickly, enough that even Daniel's phone buzzed nonstop with messages from coworkers asking if he was okay. Ariana, meanwhile, woke up alone in the house she once ruled like a throne. Her reflection in the mirror was a stranger, hair tangled, makeup smeared, eyes wild. In a panic, she turned on the TV only to see the morning news discussing a stepmother under investigation for child neglect. Her name wasn't mentioned, but she knew. She always knew when her past was catching up, and this time it wasn't just the hotel footage. That afternoon, investigator Collins arrived at Daniel's worksite, requesting additional interviews. Daniel cleared his schedule immediately. Ariana tried to call him 26 times. He answered none of them. At the CPS office, Collins revealed more findings. "Miss Blake has a prior complaint filed in another state," he said. "Financial manipulation, emotional abuse toward a minor relative, and fraudulent statements during a custody review." Daniel felt like all the air had been ripped from his lungs. "She hid all of that from me," Collins nodded. "We believe she remarried quickly to secure financial leverage. You were never her priority." Meanwhile, at her own interview, Ariana's behavior deteriorated rapidly. She yelled, denied, accused the agency of targeting her. She insisted Lila was unstable, dramatic, a liar, repeating the same script she'd used for months. But this time, no one believed her. Every outburst dug the hole deeper. By evening, Collins returned to the temporary apartment to speak with Daniel. "We've reached a decision," he said. "The evidence of neglect is overwhelming. Ariana will be removed from the home during the investigation. Given the severity, she may also face charges." Daniel exhaled shakily. Lila, sitting beside Grant on the couch, looked up with cautious hope. But the real blow came the next morning when police knocked on Ariana's door with a warrant. Not just for neglect, but for financial fraud tied to documents found in her purse at the hotel. The equity papers she waved at Daniel, they were forged. As she was escorted out, cameras captured her furious screams, her insistence that she was the victim, that everyone had turned on her. But no one listened anymore, because the mask had finally shattered. And Lila, from her safe apartment downtown, whispered to herself, "She can't hurt us now." 2 weeks after Ariana's arrest, the city felt different to Lila. Not louder or brighter, just safer. Daniel had taken leave from work to focus entirely on his daughter. He cooked breakfast with her every morning, walked her to school, and listened, really listened to everything she wanted to share. For the first time in years, Lila felt like she belonged in her own life. Grant visited often, never overstepping, always gentle. He checked in with Daniel, helped navigate paperwork, and made sure Lila had what she needed without spoiling her or making her feel small. He treated her like a person, not a problem to fix. One day, Grant surprised them with an invitation. "There's a charity gala tonight for children's advocacy programs," he explained. "They're honoring people who help bring attention to cases like yours. I was asked to speak, but I requested someone else take that moment." Daniel raised a brow. "Who?" Grant smiled and looked at Lila. That evening, Lila stepped into the grand ballroom wearing a simple blue dress Daniel had chosen for her. The place sparkled with soft lights and polished floors, but unlike the hotel lounge that terrible night, this room felt warm, welcoming. No eyes judged her, no whispers followed her. She was here because she mattered. When the host called her name, the audience applauded kindly, not out of pity but respect. Lila walked onto the stage, clutching the small card Daniel helped her write. Her voice trembled at first, but she steadied herself, remembering her mother's stories, remembering her father's promise, remembering Grant's quiet confidence in her. "My name is Lila," she began, "and I learned that being quiet doesn't keep you safe. Telling the truth does, and having people who believe you, that changes everything." The room fell silent, moved, humbled. She took a breath. "I hope every kid who feels small knows they're not alone." When she finished, the entire ballroom rose to their feet. Daniel wiped away tears. Mrs. Davenport beamed proudly. Grant clapped with a sincerity that made Lila's heart warm. After the gala, the organization announced a scholarship fund in her name, set up anonymously, but everyone knew who was behind it. Even more, Daniel received a new job offer with better hours and stability, giving him the fresh start he desperately needed. As they stepped outside into the quiet night, Lila slipped her hand into her father's. "Dad," she whispered, "are we okay now?" Daniel squeezed her hand gently. "We're better than okay. We're beginning again." And for the first time in a very long time, Lila believed him. Because this time, the future finally belonged to her. And just like that, our story comes to an end. But hey, you're still here with us, right? If you made it all the way to this moment, then something in Lila's journey must have touched your heart in a way you didn't expect. Maybe it reminded you of someone you love. Maybe it reminded you of a part of yourself you've tried to protect. Stories like this aren't just about pain. They're about rising through it. The Stoics used to say, "What stands in the way becomes the way." And that's exactly what Lila showed us. The hardest moments can become the doorway to strength, healing, and a life we truly deserve. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action." Sometimes the storm is what teaches us how to stand. So as we close this chapter, take a breath with me. Think about the courage it takes to speak the truth and the courage it takes to listen. If this story moved you, even a little, do me a small favor. Like the video, share it with someone who may need it, and subscribe so you don't miss the next journey we take together. You matter, your voice matters, and healing always begins with being seen.